the roar that shattered the world. It came out of nowhere. In the stillness of the early morning, San Francisco was suspended in a rare moment of tranquility. The kind of peace that could only exist in the quiet hours before dawn, when the city's pulse slowed and the streets were empty. A light mist curled around the tall buildings, and the Golden Gate Bridge, usually obscured by fog, stood as a quiet sentinel against the sea. But that peace shattered when the first tremor struck. At first, it was just a subtle vibration, barely noticeable to the people sleeping in their beds. But within seconds, the ground beneath the city began to shake with increasing intensity. It was a ripple at first, followed by a bone-shaking tremor. The glass windows of nearby buildings rattled, and doors slammed open and closed with violent force. Car alarms blared in unison as the first shockwave of sound surged through the air. Then, the roar came. A guttural, primal cry that seemed to tear through the very fabric of the city. It was like nothing anyone had ever heard before. Not the shriek of a plane, not the howl of an animal. This was something deep, ancient, and powerful. A noise that resonated within the earth itself. Captain Emily Blackstone was already on her feet before the first shockwave hit. A seasoned army officer, she'd lived through earthquakes, riots, and countless missions abroad. But nothing in her training had prepared her for this. As the tremor subsided, her instincts kicked in. She rushed to the command center, her heart pounding in her chest as the sound of the roar still echoed in her ears. "Status update," she barked to her team, eyes scanning the chaos unfolding across the screens. The operations officer turned to her, wide-eyed and pale. "We've got something massive coming from the ocean. Our satellites have tracked." Before he could finish, another quake rattled the building, this one even stronger than before. The walls groaned as if the earth was cracking open. Emily's pulse quickened as the lights flickered, and everything around them seemed to tremble with force. "Get the military on the line," she said, her voice steady but urgent, "and send a warning to the civilians. We need to know what's coming." Her voice was drowned out by the roar again. It was louder now, closer. Her team scrambled to gather information, but it was too late. They didn't need to wait for the satellite data. The sky above the ocean erupted in an explosion of energy, lighting up the entire bay. The horizon trembled as a massive shape broke through the waves, rising like a mountain from the depths. Godzilla. The beast loomed over the water, a towering, monstrous silhouette that filled the sky. Its thick, scaly body gleamed in the moonlight, and its eyes burned with a fiery intensity. It was larger than anything Emily had ever seen, its roar deafening as it advanced toward the city. The earth shook again beneath them, and Emily's gut twisted in a mixture of fear and disbelief. This can't be real," she whispered under her breath, her mind racing. But the reality of the situation hit like a freight train. The unthinkable had arrived. A nightmare made flesh. Godzilla. And if the legends were true, it wasn't coming alone. Emily turned to her team, their faces drained of color. "Get ready. This isn't just a monster attack. We need to prepare for war." The tremors worsened, and the city was thrown into chaos. Emergency sirens wailed, and military jets streaked across the sky, heading toward the ocean. But none of them could compare to the giant rising from the depths. The roar of the beast was deafening as it began to march toward the coastline, its heavy steps causing massive waves to crash against the shore. And then came the second roar. This one was different, more guttural, even deeper than the first. A sound that vibrated the very bones of the earth. Another titan had appeared. Out of the mist and darkness, another massive shape emerged. Larger than Godzilla, with molten red eyes and jagged stone-like armor. This creature stood taller than the city's tallest buildings. And it, too, was marching toward the city. Emily's mind raced as she watched the destruction unfold before her. She had fought in wars, commanded troops in the field, but she had never faced anything like this. She had heard rumors about other titans, but she never thought she'd see them for herself. Now, as she watched two colossals, Godzilla and another titan, advance toward San Francisco, she knew this was only the beginning. Her fingers tightened on the comms. "This is Captain Blackstone. All military units, report in. Prepare for battle. We're facing not one, but two of them. We need everything we've got." And just as she said it, the ground shook again, as if to remind her of the monstrous forces that were now descending on the city. The gathering storm. The following hours blurred into a blur of chaos and military mobilization. Captain Emily Blackstone barely had time to process the appearance of the Titans, let alone prepare for the devastation that was clearly unfolding. The monstrous roars of Godzilla and the second Titan echoed through the city, reverberating in the bones of every building, every person. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and each step these colossal creatures took seemed to shake the very foundation of the earth. The sky had darkened, not just from the storm rolling in, but from the overwhelming sense of doom that hung over the city. The lights flickered as the military jets screeched overhead, attempting to get a closer look at the beasts. But each missile strike and bomb drop felt like throwing pebbles at a mountain. Emily stood in the command center, watching the feed on the massive screens in front of her. She barely blinked. Her mind was running at 1,000,000 miles per hour, trying to formulate a plan, trying to think of anything that could stop these behemoths. She gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles white as the seconds ticked by. "Captain, the U.S. military is reporting in," her operations officer said, his voice tight with anxiety. "We've mobilized air support, and we've begun evacuating civilians, but the Titans are advancing much faster than anticipated." Emily didn't respond right away. She'd been here before, dangerous situations, last-minute decisions. But this was something different. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was a war against nature itself. The door to the command center opened, and Lieutenant Garrett Hayes, her trusted second-in-command, entered with a grim expression on his face. The second Titan, it's not just moving toward the city. It's heading straight for the underground military facility, the one we thought was dormant for decades. "Why?" Emily asked, turning to him. "What's down there?" Hayes shook his head. "We don't know, but the military's old intel suggests there's a deep underground facility beneath the city, a site from the Cold War era. We thought it was shut down years ago, but with the Titans heading there, we've got a problem." A deep rumble shook the building again, causing the screens to flicker. The roar of Godzilla echoed through the walls, louder than ever before. Emily's thoughts raced. What if this wasn't just a random attack? What if the Titans weren't here just to destroy? They were here to claim something. "Shut down all non-essential operations in the city," she ordered, her voice cool but urgent. "Get everyone to safety. We need to focus all military attention on that facility." The calm before the storm. By the time Emily and her team arrived at the command center set up near the underground facility, the city was in full panic. People flooded the streets, fleeing the Titans' approach. A few of the military jets remained overhead, launching futile missile attacks at Godzilla. But with every passing minute, it was becoming painfully clear nothing was stopping them. Godzilla had already made landfall, his massive form crashing through the city's defenses like a battering ram. His movements were slow, methodical, and terrifying. The second Titan, towering and jagged, followed suit, moving at a steady pace toward the facility. Each step they took caused the ground to quake. Captain Blackstone, the voice of a technician, called through the comms. "We're picking up massive energy readings from the underground facility. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Emily's heart raced as the information flooded in. The military had kept the facility's purpose under wraps, citing it as a security risk in case of a nuclear fallout. But now, with these creatures heading toward it, it seemed like the site was far more significant. "Prepare for a full lockdown," Emily instructed. "We can't let them access their facility." But just as the words left her mouth, a massive explosion rocked the perimeter of the city. Godzilla's tail had swiped through a skyscraper, sending it crashing to the ground, and the shockwave sent debris flying in every direction. The awakening. The military had set up their last line of defense at the facility's entrance, a makeshift barricade of tanks, artillery, and soldiers. Emily arrived at the scene just as the first of the Titans began to approach the gates of the facility. The ground vibrated under her feet as the Titan's massive feet came down, each step making the very earth crack. She watched as the beast came into view, its grotesque, jagged form rising above them. The soldiers at the barricades fired relentlessly, but their weapons had no effect. The Titan did not even flinch. Suddenly, the sky grew darker. The winds picked up, swirling dust and debris in the air. Emily looked up, her heart pounding as a deep, unnatural glow began to emanate from the underground facility. It wasn't just the typical security lights. They were more intense, more vivid. "That's it," Emily whispered. as the realization hit her. The Titans had come for something buried beneath the earth. "Captain, we have a situation." Hayes' voice crackled in her ear. "Something's happening inside. We're picking up massive energy readings. The facility, it's coming online." The ground trembled again, and the air grew thick with tension. A blinding light burst from the depths of the facility, a radiant beam of pure energy shooting toward the sky. The Titans stopped, their eyes glowing as they turned in unison toward the facility. A deep rumbling sound emanated from the earth as the Titans seemed to respond to the energy surge. Emily's heart raced. The battle had escalated from a fight for survival to something much bigger. The Titans weren't here to destroy, they were here to awaken something. And now, whatever was locked beneath the city was about to be unleashed. With the military's last line of defense crumbling, Emily knew there was no turning back. The storm had gathered, and the world would never be the same again. The heart of destruction. The air inside the underground facility felt thick, alive with an energy that could almost be felt in the bones. Captain Emily Blackstone stood at the entrance, her breath coming in sharp, controlled bursts, her mind racing as she took in the scene before her. The underground compound stretched out into the abyss, its walls adorned with strange symbols, glowing with an eerie light. The faint hum of the energy core resonated throughout the cavernous space, a steady pulse that seemed to echo against the very walls. It wasn't just a weapon, it was something much older, more dangerous, more ancient. Behind her, the Titans had finally breached the facility's perimeter. The two colossal creatures, Godzilla and the second, Jagged Titan, were now only moments away from entering. Their monstrous forms cast long shadows, their massive feet causing the ground beneath them to quake. Emily's heart raced as she looked at the military forces that had managed to regroup. Tanks, soldiers, and jets were positioned around the facility, but it was clear that they were outmatched. They had no chance against these behemoths. The true threat, however, wasn't just the Titans. It was what they were after. "Captain Blackstone," Hayes' voice crackled through her comms. "We've identified the core's location. It's in the center of the facility. But something's not right. We've detected anomalies. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever's down there is awakening." Emily's eyes narrowed. She had suspected as much. The Titans weren't just drawn here by coincidence. They were searching for something beneath the earth, a power so immense that it had remained hidden for centuries. It wasn't a weapon, they were here for the source. And if the Titans succeeded in unlocking that power, there would be nothing left to save humanity. "We need to stop them before it's too late," Emily said, her voice framed with resolve. "Hayes, get to the control center. Shut down the energy flow if you can." The descent into darkness. As Emily and her team descended deeper into the facility, the walls grew colder, the air became dense with electricity, and the ground trembled with every movement. The faint light from their flashlights reflected off the jagged edges of the stone, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. The hum of the energy core grew louder with every step they took, a sound that seemed to vibrate through their bodies. It was then that they heard it, the rumble of Godzilla's voice. It was like the roar of an ancient beast, low and resonant. The noise reverberated through the entire facility, and Emily knew the Titans were closing in. They were almost there. The team moved quickly, adrenaline pumping through their veins. Emily's heart raced as they approached the central chamber, where the energy core stood. It was an enormous structure, a glowing obelisk of crystalline material, pulsating with a power that seemed otherworldly. The safest shimmered in the dim light, an ethereal glow emanating from the very center. As they stepped into the chamber, the ground shook violently. A deafening roar echoed throughout the facility. Godzilla was just outside the door. But the Titans weren't here to destroy. They were here to awaken. The core responded to the presence of the Titans, its energy level spiking as if it recognized the creatures. Emily's eyes widened as she realized the horrifying truth. The Titans weren't just mindless monsters, they were guardians. Ancient beings who had been tied to this power for centuries. They weren't here to destroy the world. They were here to unleash something far more terrifying. The ancient energy that had been locked beneath the earth for eons. Before she could react, a violent shockwave erupted from the core, knocking them all off their feet. The walls trembled, and the air thickened with an overwhelming force. Emily's mind raced. Shut it down. Now, the final countdown. The countdown began. As the team scrambled to reach the control panel, A sudden flash of light illuminated the chamber, blinding them momentarily. The core's energy surged violently, and the ground cracked beneath them. Emily pushed through the disorienting force, her instincts guiding her toward the control panel. She had to stop it. They all had to stop it. The team fought their way through the shaking room, working desperately to shut down the power. But the Titans were growing closer, their immense forms shaking the facility with each step. Emily could hear Godzilla's deafening roar outside the walls, his claws scraping against the steel as he tried to break through. Finally, Emily reached the control panel. The buttons blinked with the urgency of the countdown, each second bringing them closer to disaster. With trembling hands, she slammed her fist onto the override switch. But nothing happened. Her heart sank. "This isn't right," she muttered. The energy flow wasn't stopping. The Titans were now inches away from the control center, their eyes glowing with malicious intent. The core was almost at full capacity. Without thinking, Emily grabbed the emergency override lever. There was no time left to wait. She pulled it with all her strength, her body trembling under the pressure. And then, silence. The energy core flickered and dimmed, its once blinding glow slowly fading. The ground beneath them stopped shaking. Godzilla's roar cut off abruptly, as if the world itself had held its breath. The Titans outside seemed to halt in their tracks, confusion flickering in their eyes. They weren't angry, just lost. The power they had been drawn to was no longer there. The aftermath. Emily stood panting, her eyes locked on the dimming energy core, her heart still racing. They had done it. They had shut it down. But the cost was clear. The Titans were still out there, forms looming ominously outside the facility. Emily turned to her team, a silent understanding passing between them. They had stopped the Titans, but the question remained, what else had been awakened beneath the earth? What had they unleashed? And more importantly, what would happen when the Titans, no longer bound by their purpose, began to turn on humanity? The final stand. The silence that followed the shutdown of the core was unsettling. The overwhelming energy that had filled the underground facility began to fade, leaving behind only the sound of heavy breathing and the creaking of the chamber's walls. Captain Emily Blackstone, still gripping the control panel, felt the weight of the moment settle over her. They had succeeded in stopping the Titans from accessing the ancient power beneath the city. For now, but the danger was far from over. The Titans were still out there, and Emily knew that their relentless march toward destruction wasn't finished. The real question was, what would happen next? Outside, the earth continued to shake with each movement of the Titans. Godzilla's roar echoed through the facility's walls, a chilling reminder that the battle was far from won. The military had no more backup. The city had already been evacuated. All that remained was a desperate stand against an unstoppable force. "We need to hold them off, Captain," he said, his voice grim as he approached her. The military's last line of defense is falling. We're the only ones left. Emily nodded, her eyes flicking to the monitors. The remaining forces outside were barely holding their ground. The Titans weren't just powerful, they were intelligent, responding to the energy and chaos they had stirred. Godzilla had led the charge, but the other Titan, a stone-like body covered in cracks that glowed with an eerie red, was now making its way toward the city center. The stakes had never been higher. "Get to the surface," Emily ordered. "We'll need every hand we can get." The last line of defense, as Emily and her team ascended back from the facility, the weight of what they were about to face settled them. The world above was now a battlefield. There was no time for hesitation. The Titans were closing in on the heart of San Francisco, their massive forms casting shadows over the crumbling city. By the time they reached the surface, the first signs of destruction were already visible. Buildings lay in ruins, the skyline barely recognizable through the smoke and fire. The sound of combat, screaming, explosions, the roar of Titans echoed across the shattered city. The remaining military forces, though brave, were no match for the Titans. Their artillery had done nothing to slow them down. Emily and her team sprinted toward the heart of the chaos, their goal clear: stop the Titans from reaching the energy core that was now threatening to overrun the city. Godzilla was close, his form looming in the distance, while the stone Titan followed closely behind. Both creatures seemed drawn to the facility's power, now more alive and dangerous than ever. "Captain, we don't have much time," Hayes called, his voice urgent. "They're headed straight for the reactor. We can't afford to let them get any closer. The ground trembled again, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. Godzilla and the Stone Titan were not just attacking, they were following the energy surge that had come from the facility. They were searching for something, their monstrous eyes glowing with a strange intelligence. But Emily had no answers, only a sinking feeling that the Titans were more than mere beasts. They were ancient guardians, awakened from the depths of time. And now, they were here for something more, something they believed was rightfully theirs. The final confrontation. Emily reached the military's makeshift command post, where the last remnants of defense had been organized. Tanks, soldiers, and military jets were stationed, but they were clearly outclassed. Godzilla was nearly upon them, his towering form filling the skyline. Form a perimeter, Emily barked to her team. We need to buy time for the reactor to cool down and for the military to regroup. There was no time to waste. The final showdown was imminent. The ground shook as Godzilla's massive foot collided with the earth, his roar deafening. The entire city trembled beneath the weight of his steps. But Emily wasn't afraid. She couldn't afford to be. As she readied herself for the battle ahead, a flash of insight cut through the chaos. The Titans were acting with purpose. There was something they were searching for in the heart of the city, and she had a feeling that whatever that was, it had to be destroyed. Hayes, get those troops in position, Emily shouted, her voice full of command. We can't stop them with force alone. We need to disable the energy core from the outside. The military tried to regroup, firing everything they had, but Godzilla barely even noticed. His colossal body withstood every attack, his eyes still locked on the energy core. But just as Emily had anticipated, the second Titan was headed straight for it. We'll make our stand here, Emily said, preparing to face the Titans head-on. We can't stop them forever, but if we can delay them long enough, maybe we can shut this whole operation down. The clash of giants. As Godzilla advanced, Emily and her team took position. The sound of the Titans' footsteps was deafening, a constant rumbling that shook the ground beneath them. The city around them was crumbling, yet all Emily could focus on was the massive, hulking figures moving closer, their molten eyes set on the energy core. Then, with a roar that split the sky, Godzilla lunged forward, and the battle began. Missiles flew, and artillery fired, but the Titan's power was overwhelming. Godzilla swung his tail, knocking tanks and soldiers aside with ease, while the Stone Titan swung its massive, jagged fists, sending shockwaves through the air. The U.S. Army fought valiantly, but they were no match for the Titan's overwhelming strength. As Godzilla neared the core, Emily knew the final moment had come. There was no more time for waiting. She signaled to her team, Hayes, get to the reactor controls, now. The battle reached its peak, as Godzilla and the Stone Titan squared off, their massive forms colliding with explosive force. Emily's mind was spinning with the realization that the Titans were not just monsters, they were part of something far greater, something tied to the core of the Earth itself. With one final push, Emily's team managed to overload the energy core, sending a wave of destructive energy into the Titans. Godzilla and the Stone Titan staggered back, their colossal bodies flickering